Hi, today we're going to be reviewing the adding and subtracting of decimals. And like always, let's go ahead and get started by reviewing our standard. Here's the standard. Now please read along with me. Number and operations. The student applies mathematical process standards to develop and use strategies and methods for whole number computations and decimal sums and differences in order to solve problems with efficiency and accuracy. The student is expected to add and subtract whole numbers and decimals to the hundredths place using the standard algorithm. And I'm going to show you some notes that you can use when you're having to add or subtract decimals. In other words, when you have to find the sum or the difference of decimal numbers. Alright, here are the notes on adding and subtracting decimals. And as you can see, on the bottom, we have the standard, which is 4.4a. Now, underneath, I have some steps that you can follow to help you along when you're adding and subtracting decimals. And I'm going to talk about them first so that you know what we're doing, and then we're going to actually practice some computation problems. So, the first step, you always have to line up decimal points vertically. And if you remember, the word vertically means up and down. So that means your decimal points have to be one on top of the other, like you see here in my example. Now, when you are subtracting, it always helps to keep in mind that the bigger number goes on top when you're subtracting decimals in 4th grade. And don't forget, it's really important that you include the decimal points in your answer. Just like in this example right here, this person included their decimal points in the answer. And that's exactly what you're supposed to do. After you've lined up your decimal points vertically, up and down, you can go on to step number 2. Now read it with me, please. Add a 0 in the empty places. You have to add a 0 in empty places so that you have the equal number of digits. And that's like our little tip. That's why it has 2 little stars here. Now if you look at my example, I have my decimals written and the decimal points are lined up. However, if you look back here, there used to be an empty place value. So to remind myself to do the math correctly, to help me out, I'm going to include or add a 0 in any of the empty spots. After you've done that, you can move on to step number 3. You're going to start at the smallest place value, then go to the left. What that means is that when you're going to add or subtract decimals, you have to start at the smallest place value. In this example right now, my smallest place value is on the right hand side. And the smallest place value is the hundredths place. So another way that I think would help you to remember how to add or subtract decimals is if you follow this tip right here and read it with me. You have to subtract from right to left. So in my example, I'm going to start on the right hand side. In this example, I'm going to start adding on the right hand side. And then I'm going to move on to the left. And that's why I have this arrow right here to show you and remind you that you're going to start subtracting from right to left. And of course, let's go back to our step number 3. The second bullet is very, very important. You have to regroup as needed. And here's some helpful hints from Ms. Castañeda. She says, don't forget to bring down the decimal, which if you follow step number 1, that means you already brought down the decimal into your answer. And you add or subtract from right to left. other words, you subtract the smallest place value to the largest place value. So if you follow these 3 simple steps, you will be on your way to efficiently adding and subtracting decimals. Okay, now that we have gone over the steps, I want you to think to yourself, if you understood these steps, you can continue watching the video. But if you feel like you're struggling or there's a part you didn't quite understand and you need to pause the video, rewind, and watch again, because repetition might help you understand better. Okay, let's go ahead and get started with some example problems. I'm going to start with an addition problem because I always feel like adding is easier. So we're going to start there, and then we'll move on to subtracting. So here's my first problem. Let's read the problem together. 87 and 96 hundredths plus 4 and 7 tenths equals. So now, if you remember, step number 1 says that you have to line up your decimal points. So I'm going to, on my paper, I'm going to actually write in a decimal point, and I always like to start with my decimal points first, just so I don't make a mistake. And then I write in my numbers. So I have 87 wholes, and then I have 96 hundredths, plus 4 wholes and 7 tenths. Okay, now that I have this done, I need to go ahead and follow step number 2. Step number 2, if you remember, says you have to add a 0 in any of the empty places. So I see right here I have an empty place, I'm going to add a 0. And right here I have an empty place, so I'm going to add a 0. The zeros in the empty places just kind of helps you keep your numbers aligned. So make sure that you have an equal number of digits on the top and the bottom, or on both numbers. And it just kind of makes adding and subtracting a lot easier. Okay, and then we're ready to go on to step number 3. And if you remember, step number 3 says that you start adding or subtracting at the smallest place value, and then go to the left. In other words, you start your operations from the right and then go to the left. And here my smallest place value is the hundredths, which is this place value right here. Now I know 6 plus 0 is 6. And I know 9 plus 7 is 16. However, if you remember on step number 3, there was a second bullet that says that you have to regroup as needed. So I know I cannot write 2 digits in the same place value spot, so I'm going to have to regroup. I'm going to write my 6 here from the 16, and the 1 from the 16 I'm going to regroup into the 1's place value right here. Then I'm going to continue my addition problem. I know that 1 plus 7 is 8, and then I know that 8 plus 4 is 12, and I run into the same problem. I have to regroup. So I'm going to write my 2 here from the 12, and then I'm going to regroup my 1 from the 12 into the 10's place value. And I'm going to continue adding. 1 plus 8 is 9, and 9 plus 0 is still 9. So now I know that when I add 87 and 96 hundredths plus 4 and 7 tenths, my sum will be 96 and 66 hundredths. Okay, now I have a challenge problem for you that I'm going to want you to solve. So what you're going to do is you're going to pause the video and solve this. When you come back, I'm going to have the answer on here for you to look at. If you get it correct, I think you're on the right steps to adding and subtracting decimals, and if you don't, you probably need to go back and rewatch the video. I purposefully picked numbers, decimal numbers, that you're going to have to regroup. So you're really going to have to work with that and pay close attention to that. Okay, go ahead and pause the video now. Hi, welcome back. Here is the answer. And I want you to check your work to see if you did it correctly. When you add 96 and 9/10 plus 8 and 4/10, you're going to get the answer of 85 and 3/10. Alright, I hope you found this video very useful. If it was going a little too fast, go ahead and rewind and rewatch the parts that you need more clarification on. If you have any questions, I want you to write them down, and that way you can ask an adult. Thank you so much for watching the video, and if you would like to continue on with me and practice the subtraction of decimals, go ahead and click on the link that will appear in this corner, right here. Click on that and continue with the math fun.